Thank you for listening to this episode of Faces of Our Cities. I'm your host, Jesse. Today, I am super excited to be sitting down with Andrew Dillard. Andrew and I have known each other for a few years, quite a few years, probably almost a decade, going on a decade now, although we've taken years in between our conversations with each other. And so whenever we end up talking, multiple life changes have happened. In fact, we likely have not covered most of them. I struggle to decide how to talk about how we met. Andrew and I met under some interesting circumstances. We were both going through interesting adventures in our life. Me as a pretty much a degenerate 20-some-year-old, and Andrew as an entrepreneur.
I was still also a degenerate 20-something-year-old there too, Jesse. But yes.
Well, you seem to have it together a little bit more, and a lot more than I did. So I don't know just before we started this podcast, we were talking about who should tell the story about how we met. And what do you want to do here? You want me to tell my side?
Let me tell my side,
or do you
and then let's see how
side?
much it correlates to what you remember there. So you started out perfect there. Okay. Yeah, I was also a degenerate 20-year-old. I had stumbled my way into starting a brewery at the time, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that coming up here in a minute. But I remember one night I got a phone call or a text message from some unknown number saying, "Hey, I forgot my coat at your brewery. I was there tonight, and I was drinking with a buddy of mine. Can I come back and get it?" And I said, "Sure." I didn't live very far away from the brewery at the time, so I went down there, opened it back up after we had closed, and all of a sudden I see you pedal up on a bicycle, and we dug around the brewery and we actually found your coat, and that is the moment that kind of got us to this point in time over 10 years later. So that's what I remember. I don't know if that kind of translates to what you recall or not, but
I don't think
you don't think so?
Right.
That's definitely right.
No. This is how I know that's not right. I have proof. Because I'm so glad we're doing this. So what I remember is that at that time I was living with one of my best friends, or actually my best friend. His name is Timmy. I don't know if you remember Timmy or not. But Timmy and I found out about your brewery being open, and we realized, hey, there's this brewery within walking distance. This is awesome. I can't believe we finally have a brewery within walking distance. This is going to be literally the worst thing that could possibly happen for our health. And so I remember us going down to the brewery on a Thursday night. It was like the first or second night you were open, or like week you were open. And I remember him and I walking in and having a really challenging experience with the beer tender, which wasn't you. It was somebody else, and we were, degenerate 20-some-year-olds that were looking for a good time, and we were like, wow, this is super boring. And we thought the beer was all right, but I think between the all right beer and the really terrible service, we were like, this place sucks. So we quick finished our beers, and we went home to drink PBR.
Because that's so much better.
Because we were like, hey, okay, look, I know you're like, I hate this story. But I remember sitting in our living room and being like, Timmy, we can't let this happen. We can't let it happen. We have to help this brewery. If we're going to have a brewery in our backyard, we have to make it at least so that it's a fun place to go. And so I think I am almost willing to bet I can search my Gmail and find the email that I sent to the brewery saying, hey, we had a really terrible experience. Your beer's not that good, but I think I can help you, and I'm willing to work for free. And I remember you responded, and I was like, he probably won't respond because I was not very nice in my email, but you responded and you were like, I'll be down at the brewery tomorrow. And at this point I was like barely working like 10 hours a day or 10 hours a week. Like I could barely like pay my bills. And so I was like, all right. And like came down to the brewery and we met. And I said, I think I convinced you to let me pour beer on like Thursday nights. I was like, just let me help you. Like, trust me, like anything is better than what I experienced the other night. And you were like, okay, I can pay you this much. And I think I was like, no, I'll work for tips and free beer, even though I don't like the beer that much. and you were like, all right, let's do it. And I was like, holy cow, I just got a job, you guys. And that's, I guess, how I remember it. From there, we just had this bond, and eventually you let me work like Friday nights, and that was it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I do remember that conversation, and I remember you saying, hey, I think I can help you. Maybe I am wrong. Maybe I'm getting kind of the order of events here wrong, but I do recall you guys bicycling down for a forgotten jacket at some point in time. In all honesty, though, you were doing me a favor because, I was running that place largely by myself. We did have other partners and people helping there. But, I was working a full-time job, too, at the same time. And, like, here you come in and you're like, well, I can kind of help you out. I can tend to the bar. And we were open late, and we were open on Thursdays, on Fridays, and like those are normal work days for me. And I'm up at 6 in the morning going to my actual job, and you did me a favor.
And you had people coming in; it wasn't dead. Like really quickly, there was foot traffic because
for people that obviously don't know, like we were a brewery surrounded by apartment complexes. Like there were a ton of people. In walking distance in a popular neighborhood, kind of downtown area. I mean, it was a fantastic location. We just needed your help with serving, I guess.
I guess, it was really great too because it was in like a warehouse. It had like the big doors. I want to say you opened in winter.
That sounds about right. Yeah, it was cold.
Yeah, and but like people walking their dogs could just walk straight into the garage door, get a beer, hang out next to their dog. It is a great spot. I think that brewery technically is still open.
10 plus years later.
So you're not there anymore?
No, I'm not. Yeah, I life happens, careers kind of happen, and that was one of the things where. Like I said, I was working all the time. I was not only serving people, I was also making the beer there. So when you said the beer was terrible, I'll take that personally, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. Right. But, I was working often until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, going home and, going to a job that actually paid money. So, it was a labor of love, but it was fun. I'm glad I did it. I learned a ton about it, and not only making beer and selling it, but like the entrepreneurial side and building that up from scratch and sourcing funding and sourcing locations and all of that kind of went into the startup of that. But it is one of the more things that I'm more proud of in my quote unquote career, even though it's not something I do now. And I was sad to leave it. But I think I'm still on the right path, for me anyways. So
without a doubt, I mean, and I only know a fraction of what you had to pull off, but you're right. Like the PR that you did, right? I mean, I don't doubt that. Like your wife was there to support, right? And you had friends and family that were around, but largely it was on you. And you, like you said, I remember there being like a crowdfunding component to the brewery.
The idea started with Kickstarter, to be honest with you. And I can't remember the exact number I tried to raise on Kickstarter. I'll skip to the end and spoil it. It was a massive failure of a Kickstarter campaign. I think it was like $15,000 or something like that I was trying to raise through Kickstarter. And I think I got like $200. Like it was just a complete and utter failure. And the hook at the time, because I was like, man, there's so many breweries that are starting in, I'm in Milwaukee, right? So the city of beer, essentially, that you could throw a rock and hit a brewery in this town. And so I had to think of a way to distinguish myself from other competitors. And, my wife is type 1 diabetic, and, I was like, there's something there. There's a hook there around, can I make a beer taste good, but still be low on carbohydrates? So her blood sugar, she could drink it and not have kind of a blood sugar impact there. And I was able to, and I tried to do the Kickstarter campaign using that as a hook. It failed, but somehow some of the more local media sources, a newspaper, picked up on the story. And that was the kick that kind of got us moving down the road, that kind of introduced me to, my partners, and kind of helping to set up the brewery from a cost standpoint and get it running. It would help kind of with some of the construction aspect of it as well. But it's funny, thinking back of the chain of events of how all this happened, luck and happenstance, really, and hard work, a lot of it.
Yeah. I think about, I listen to How I Built This podcast by Guy Raz a lot. And, he always asks the question, was it luck or skill or hard work, or what was it? Or how much do you attribute to each? And almost everyone always, at least bare minimum, is 50% is luck, right? And being in the right place at the right time. Some would say it's being blessed, right? At the end of the day, there's something else that just has to happen that you don't have any control over. And I remember thinking that too, hearing that when the Kickstarter campaign just didn't go, I was like, how in the world is this a thing? And then even once you guys opened, and it was how in the world are they even able to keep on making beer? Because you're right, you're working full time, brewing at night. I couldn't help you any more than clean kegs, which you let me do once, I think. And then I did a terrible job, and I was back to serving. And so you were doing so much of it. And like you said, working a full-time job, I think you also had, I'm going to bring this out, the hot sauce that you were
another side hustle
selling, that I mean, you're an entrepreneur. You have that entrepreneur spirit. You like the chase and in just betting on yourself, which is what it seems like, right? Which I think is a good bet personally, because I think that ultimately after I met you, I was like, it doesn't even care what the beer tastes like. I really like Andrew. I'm willing to hang out here and help him make his dream come true, because I really dig Andrew, right? He's a bet worth making. So help me understand, and our audience understand. So you're not currently working on any entrepreneurial things, right? Are you mostly working full time?
Yes and no, really. So I work a full-time corporate America job right now, and we can talk about that in a little bit too. That pays all the bills. But, to your point about having kind of that drive and that motivation to keep going and have that entrepreneurial spark, I mean, it's still kindling inside of me, no doubt. I will say, peak pandemic time frame, we were at home working, nobody's going out. I did decide to start a YouTube channel. I don't actually think I told you this story. No,
you did
it only has 3 videos on it right now, so it's not a full thing. It's called Drew Dabbles. So kind of a play on my name plus how I dabble in a lot of different things. And one of my hobbies that I do is, woodworking, home construction, DIY kind of things. So I was doing a ton of work not only on my house, but on some different woodworking projects. So I think there's a video of me making a door on there. I think I made a pot holder for a plant at some point. So it's not super exciting. It's not I'm going to turn this into a business, but it keeps me busy. It's a hobby. You can get money from it if you get big enough and your drive is there, but that's not my motivator right now. It's just to have fun and do that. Drew Dabbles, quick plug there for my 3-video YouTube channel with 17 subscribers.
Well, cool. I'm gonna have my troll accounts.
Go ahead. I appreciate that. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell button.
I love it. So what is it that you're doing full time? Before this podcast started, I was like, we're gonna talk about it, but in my mind, it's the boringest thing possible.
Yeah.
When I hear that you do it, I'm like,
Yeah.
what is that? What do you do?
I certainly can understand why you would think that. No doubt about it. So I work for a major pharmaceutical manufacturer right now in our market access insights team, basically doing a whole bunch of number crunching and insight providing to help in oncology specifically. So I work on an oncology franchise, and I said I would kind of make this sound a little less boring, a little less nerdy. If you want to think about it as like I work to supply the knowledge and the insights to help people save lives, that might be one way to say it. I'm not going to directly take credit for that because it's obviously the care teams, the hospitals, the clinics, all of those people go into that. But I excel in making sure that our product is available to those key decision makers who are making those treatment decisions for their patients and making sure that they have the right access to our products. Our team has the right knowledge about their key stakeholders who are prescribing. So that's a lot of what I do at a very, very high level. A lot of nerdiness and numbers goes into that too, but I won't get too deep into that side of it.
What kind of, I guess, the data that you're analyzing, it's mostly just information around how much of your products are being used and where they're being used, and trying to make sure that supply chain is filled to the
exactly.
right amount,
it's really about getting to the who, the what, and the where, and a little bit of the why of our particular product. So understanding who's writing our product, whether that's a doctor or a hospital or a clinic, understanding where they're writing it. Are they writing it, in what we like a smaller account or smaller community practice? Are they at one of those major academic centers like a Northwestern, for example? Or why are they writing our product? What are some of the reasons that they're using ours versus, and it's a competitive marketplace. There's a bunch of different manufacturers that have products out there. Why are they using our product over a competitor's product? So diving into those components and understanding really the root cause of our product versus the competitor's product, and really kind of getting into that, providing that information and data and insights to our marketing teams who we work very closely with to help go out and engage those key stakeholders in a most appropriate way.
How does the work that you do translate or help you as an entrepreneur?
So I think the biggest thing of what I do and how I do it is the mental aspect of it. So thinking through the process, thinking through the steps that are needed to take, thinking through the delivery of that, the messaging of that. That's probably the most important thing. And I would say over the last 2 years or so, my emphasis has really been on storytelling. How do you tell this story so it resonates most effectively with your intended audience, and making sure you're changing that story where appropriate. And that's a huge focus, not only of mine, but of our organization as well, making sure that the story is coming out. And I'm happy to talk about what that means for me, and maybe it means for you. Because I think when you hear storytelling, I think you might think something a little bit different than what I mean. And I tell you, our organization thinks about it the same way as I think you do. And I'll go to an example of that. So storytelling for me, and previous to about 2 years ago, has always been a linear trend. So as the data guy here, we would often start with a problem, we go into the data, and we go into the analytics of the data. And that would be the story. That would be the entire kind of flow of the story. And there's a lady here up in Milwaukee called Nicole Knafik, and she runs storytellingwithdata.com. And I follow her website, her blog. I have a couple of her textbooks here, and I've been to a couple of her trainings. And she is a big advocate, and I agree, for what she calls a narrative story arc. And you think about traditional storytelling media today. It kind of starts with the plots in the beginning. You kind of have that rising action over time in an arc fashion. And you really get to that inciting incident, or the kind of the climax of the story. And that climax is resolved through de-escalation of conflict, ultimately ending at a resolution. For us, and prior to kind of that training and that kind of learnings, we never took the intended audience on that journey. And from her perspective, Nicole's perspective, and my perspective, the original way that I mentioned, the very linear storytelling trend, is very selfish of us to do on behalf of our recipient audience there. So they're missing out on context. They're missing out on that conflict and on that tension, which really grasps their attention and keeps them invested in your story. So big focus of mine on kind of storytelling and adding in the concept of that narrative arc and how do we present this information and making sure that it's visually a compelling story as well.
When you're sharing that story, who is it that you're usually having to share that information or that story with? And are they ready for that? Or are they like, Andrew, just tell me the numbers. Just tell me the numbers.
Yeah.
Like the way you explain it, I'm like, I feel like everyone just wants to read a spreadsheet.
They're not ready for it. And that's kind of like the biggest challenge that we're trying to get through is like, people are just like go, and they want kind of the answers, but we have to walk them through the process for that message to resonate completely. And it's a little bit of an educational opportunity for us to work with our stakeholders who are, they can range from coworkers to senior leadership within the organization. So major decision makers of a top 5 pharmaceutical company in the world. And you have to think about framing those conversations differently depending on your audience. Yes, we deal with data. Yes, we deal with numbers, but it's so much more than that. You have to be really good at how you tell those numbers and understanding. Not only are we people, we're not really robots. So there is an emotional aspect to it. There's personalities to it. There's conflicting stakeholders and understanding the people. And how people react to that data and that knowledge is as much, if not more than important than just knowing how to get to those numbers and what the numbers say.
Sure. I can imagine too that, a lot of times people are afraid of the numbers. Like they're afraid of what numbers are going to tell them. Like maybe they're, the analytics on a video say, right, that I made. A producer might be kind of nervous about seeing what the data shows about that, right? But and I'm not saying you have to spin it so that it's always good news, but like you have to look at that data and see what it's telling you versus just making assumptions like it was a bad video. Well, I don't know, for like these 14 people, it was a really good video. So what was it about those 14 people that made it such a video worth watching?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. What can we learn from that, and what can we learn from that data, rather than what decisions do we make based on data? Okay.
I don't know. Was that
cool?
Was that less boring than you initially thought it would be, talking about data and everything else?
It's so different than the normal conversations we end up having. Mostly because our conversations are like, so what have you been doing with your life for the last 90 years? Yeah. So I can really appreciate that we've dug deeper into this, and maybe this just means that we have to hang out more regularly. So there might be an opportunity for that coming up, but we'll get to that after we turn off this recording. So, With that, we covered that you've been an entrepreneur, you do entrepreneurial things, right? You're working on what was it?
Drew Dabbles.
Drew Dabbles.
Yeah.
Drew Dabbles. And you have a really interesting role in storytelling, which is not something that I ever thought I would hear you say when you talk about your job. So with all of that, and having interacted with all levels and all types of people throughout your career in life, what are some things that you would be willing to offer up to our listeners when it comes to either lessons learned that you wish you would have known before jumping in as an entrepreneur, things that maybe you're willing to let other entrepreneurs know ahead of time, or just life hacks? Are there things that you do in your daily routine that make you more efficient, or communication styles? What are you willing to give us in return for absolutely
Well,
nothing?
I thought I was getting paid for this, so we'll talk about that after the conversation here. But
Yeah.
yeah, so that's a great question. I think, you caused me to think a lot about why did I start the brewery? Why did I try to become an entrepreneur, and what were the reasons for that? And I think to become a successful entrepreneur, your motivations have to be right. And what I mean by that is, I didn't start the brewery or the hot sauce with ideas that I was going to be sailing on a yacht around the world in 5 years. Like, that never crossed my mind. My motivators for that were freedom. And what I mean is, freedom to make my own rules, to be my own boss, to kind of do what I thought was best for an organization, and not really kind of have all the checks and balances that come with corporate America, which are both good and bad. And I think understand your motivations before you jump in is probably a good advice for anybody who's thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. And then at the same time, if your motivations are work for you, and you are committed to being an entrepreneur, it's don't stop. I think I was talking to a group of young professionals yesterday about this, and they use the word failure, which I'm not a huge fan of that word, because I actually don't believe there is such a thing as failure. It's an educational opportunity. It's not necessarily a failure. Like, yes, it might not have gone as you thought it would, or as you planned on it going, but that doesn't mean it's a failure. You've learned from it, hopefully, and you'll be able to move on from that in a better way. So, not every idea is going to be a good idea, and that's okay. As long as you've learned and you can adapt from that, I think it's very helpful from that entrepreneur mindset.
I think that's great. Can I make one comment on that? I was having a conversation with someone yesterday or 2 days ago, and they asked me to identify a time in my life where something didn't go the way I thought it should, or something just didn't work out right. But in the end, it turned out to be a good thing. And I was really stuck. I was like, what? What do you mean? And they're like, like, when were you surprised that like something bad like turned out to be good? And I was like, I gotta be honest, I don't remember the last time that happened. Mostly because like I'm really excited when things don't go the way they're supposed to. Like, I don't see it as a bad thing. I haven't seen things not working out the way I thought they should being a bad thing for probably 10, 15 years, and 15 years ago for sure, but my memory is gone. I don't remember things 15 years ago, but that's kind of like, I think you have to have kind of an idea, a mindset like that as an entrepreneur. Like, this is going to go bad, but hold on, I'm excited to see how this actually turns out, because I probably had like a wrong idea in my head.
It's not directly related, but I've always loved that quote, where everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth, right? I think Mike Tyson or somebody said that. I don't know. Sounds about right.
Sounds right.
But it's so true, right? You can plan and plan and plan, and you can be the most prepared that you'll ever be, and a complete and utter curveball could get delivered to you, and that's the end of your plan. And that doesn't mean it was a bad plan at all. It just means you're now having to come up with a new one and pivot and change and adapt.
All right. We'll take it. Well, hey, Andrew, thank you so much for taking this time. It's really been great to see you. And I really hope that anyone who watches this reaches out and connects with you on LinkedIn. And you'll have to first, before you connect, you'll have to ask them, well, have you listened to the podcast or not? Because if you haven't, you need to first go check.
Yeah, I'll make sure. I will only accept LinkedIn requests if you mention you watched the podcast. How about that, Jesse, for a plug? I only have like 400
Love
LinkedIn
it.
connections
Love it.
anyway, so I don't have very many. So yeah, but reach out to me. I'm certainly available, and I'll connect with you guys if you're interested or you want to talk more. Certainly happy to do that. And Jesse, man, it's been great. It's been great being here with you, talking to you about all this stuff. It's fun.
Yeah.
I'm happy. I'm happy
Appreciate it.
I got to have this conversation with you because you really were there from the infancy of my entrepreneurial career, and you got to kind of see it from the ground up, which is an interesting dynamic to talk about now, 10 years later. So.
Yeah, that's crazy. I guess I didn't even realize. I thought you had. I mean, I knew at least the hot sauce had been going on. So I've always looked up to you as someone who had like a wealth of knowledge. Obviously, you still do, and you still did because you were so far ahead of so many people that I was hanging around. No one else that I was hanging around with was doing, even attempting to start their own thing. And so, thank you.
We'll have to do another podcast on imposter syndrome because, I feel like I was faking it until I was making it, and you were there for the whole thing. So I guess that means it worked because you bought it. So.
Yeah, totally. All right. Thank you so much, Andrew, and we'll connect again soon.